How to advocate for services and supports in South Carolina. What is a disability advocate? A disability advocate is someone who acts, speaks, or writes to promote, defend, and protect the human rights of people with disabilities. Disability advocates may advocate for themselves, another person, or a group of people with disabilities. Why is advocacy important? Advocacy is vital in improving and sustaining the quality of life for persons with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. To be effective, advocacy must take place at both the individual and system levels. Advocacy can be aimed at public officials, support systems, and the general public. The ARC was built as a grassroots organization around kitchen tables as individuals and their families organized and fought for their rights and full inclusion in the community. Today, advocates across the country continue to advocate and share their stories about what it means to live every day with a disability and what is possible with proper supports and services. Their stories and activism transform legislation and numbers into real-life impact. Through them, the mission of the ARC comes to life and demonstrates the importance of building a future that includes us all. For nearly 70 years, the ARC has been at the forefront of the fight for the civil rights and inclusion of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, playing a leading role in major victories in civil rights, community living, education, income security, and other important issues. We have fought to close institutions and make life in the community possible. We have opened the school doors for students with disabilities to be included in the classroom alongside peers without disabilities, and we have advocated for affordable health care access. We are at the table for every major public policy fight and advancement impacting the lives of people with disabilities. Advocates must communicate effectively with individuals they assist, encouraging them to express and act on their thoughts, choices, and feelings about issues and proposed solutions to problems. The advocate and the individual must be able to understand each other. The advocate should exercise great care to ensure that the person with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities understands the benefits and risks of any decision. When making decisions, individuals should be encouraged to consult with the important people in their lives. Advocates have an ethical obligation to represent the desires and needs of the person they represent, regardless of their own personal opinions on matters under consideration. In certain circumstances, parents, other legal representatives, or other supporters may need to be involved in making decisions with and on behalf of the individual. At such times, advocates must represent the interests of the individual. Advocates must be careful to recognize and set aside their own personal desires or points of view that may conflict with those of the individual for whom they are advocating. If there is a conflict of interest, the advocate should withdraw from the decision-making process. Advocacy for change, which stems from commitment and vision, should be a collaborative process among parents and consumers in partnership with professionals and lawmakers. Using surveys, interactive focus groups, in-person interviews, and telephone interviews, we can explore and identify the barriers to successful advocacy, both for parents and consumers, and work together to be a force for change in the intellectual and developmental disability community. Without strong advocacy at all levels, people with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities may not have access to needed supports as well as opportunities to exercise inherent civil and human rights. Additionally, strong advocacy may be required to prevent and/or address abuse, neglect, and exploitation that people with disabilities may experience. Persons with disabilities may need the support of advocates to become effective self-advocates. Self-advocates should know about, understand, and assert their rights. Obtain support to be effective self-advocates. Practice self-determination and advocacy. Learn and develop the skills necessary to advocate for oneself. practice self-protection, obtain needed services, and fully participate in their community. Be sure to look in the description below to download this presentation in order to click on the links embedded in this and other slides to navigate to helpful resources you'll find throughout the presentation.
It's very vital that you attend your IEP meetings because it's about you. Nobody's gonna know yourself but you, and you know what you need.
Start your transition plan early, ask about it, just in case your school never mentioned it to you. Know that you're supposed to have a transition plan at an early age.
For people like myself who have had advocates like a strong parent or a guardian, they're not gonna be there in college and they're not gonna be there with you for the rest of your life. So it's very important that you take heed and take notice of what you need, so when they do step away, you can just take the ball and continue rolling.
They can advocate for themselves by reaching out to their school support team to see what each staff members have to offer for them.
For students who do go to school with able-bodied peers or have able-bodied peers around them, maybe you can think of programs or activities that include both populations and that you guys can feed off each other and learn from each other.
From the workplace, I would like to see them interact with other employees that don't have disabilities, so it doesn't just have to be a disability employed place.
You should be really engaged, really open. Don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone, because that's the only way you're going to know what new capabilities you have.
I would encourage all students to never be ashamed of their disability, because I believe that everyone has differences.
Your disability gives you the voice, a different perspective on life that people may take for granted. So use your disability as a tool to teach others. Make sure you're a key player in everything. Make sure you're active. Make sure you're telling people, no, this is not how it should be. I work with it best this way, or I think I need this services.
We already have labels as people with disabilities, and if we follow through with the labels, then we'll never get where we dreamed of.
The future is not limited to anyone, and don't let your disability stop you. And all these things that you're doing now is gonna help you on the path to a better life and a more inclusive life, and give you the freedom that you wanted to do the things that you want to.
Today, me and my colleagues in the disability movement are meeting on Capitol Hill with our representatives, our senators, and our congresspeople.
We are excited to be here because we're trying to reach out to our congressional delegation about all the supports. First, to say thank you for the services for people with disabilities, but also to remind them how important they are.
We're doing that because we want to let them know about issues we're concerned about.
I had the opportunity to come here to represent my son and my community as a Latino community, to advocate for them.
I realized advocacy was one key way to help people live a great life, and that if we didn't have advocacy, there was going to be a lot of pitfalls ahead.
They just need people to come here and tell us what we need, and just go out there and be an advocate for the children.
Basically, it's about storytelling. You just tell your story. You're having a conversation. What's interesting is you always find a lot of personal connections when you really get down to it. So you'll find out, especially with something like autism, that, oh yeah, they know someone with autism.
The one thing I'd love to see every congressman see is either see a family live or one of the individuals with disabilities live, and hear about how what they've agreed to provide funding for helps them live each day fully.
To get involved, visit thearc.org/joinourfight.
Now that you know a little bit about advocacy and what it means to be an advocate, it's time to learn more about some of the issues facing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. People with disabilities are full participants in our democratic society, and we must work together to shape a federal and state partnership that protects their civil rights and provides benefits, supports, and services for people with disabilities. We envision a nation whose high expectations for all people with disabilities make possible the fulfillment of academic potential, competitive employment in the community, active engagement in civic life, and full inclusion in society. A few challenges that individuals with disabilities face in South Carolina. Transportation. There's a lack of public transportation in rural areas, and many locations are not on public transportation routes. Home and community-based services. Access to HCBS is the bridge to being able to live in the community instead of an institution. Respite. For some families, there's an inability to utilize respite, or the availability is minimal. This results in many families needing to use private pay options for the costly ability to hire a caregiver. With 1 in 4 adults being a designated family caregiver, the need for increased respite services is growing rapidly. Waiver waiting lists. As of this recording, there are over 15,000 people with intellectual and/or related disabilities waiting for services. There are over 10,000 people with disabilities waiting for supports on the Community Supports Waiver. Aging caregivers. There are over 5,000 people with disabilities living at home with a caregiver over the age of 55, and over 1,200 people living with a caregiver over the age of 75. Many will be seeking residential assistance in the near future. Where will they go? Direct support professionals and case managers. Insufficient funding to support livable wages for DSPs and case management staffing negatively impacts the quality of supports and success that individuals have in living the life they choose in the community. The turnover rate for case managers and early interventionists is at over 29%. Special education. IDEA needs to be fully funded, and students need to be protected from the widespread use of restraint and seclusion as punishment in school. Affordable housing. Adequate and stable funding is needed to support people with disabilities to be able to live in the community instead of institutions. What solutions do you need? So how do you find out who represents you? You go to www.statehouse.gov/legislatorssearch.php. Enter in your address information to find your legislators. When I enter my address, I find my United States Senators and Representative, members of the South Carolina Congressional Delegation, and I find my South Carolina State Senator and Representative. There will be clickable links for you to follow to get contact information. For example, when I click on Chip Huggins' information, you see all of his contact information, personal information, committee assignments, sponsored bills in the House, his voting record, and other information about him. Take time to learn about your senator and your representative. Call or email their office to schedule an appointment to speak to them. Advocacy and storytelling. Sharing your story makes a difference. Stories are a powerful advocacy tool. They can change people's hearts and minds. Every individual in the special needs community has a unique story to tell, whether a parent, sibling, professional, extended family member, or supporter. Storytelling has always been a big part of society, dating back tens of thousands of years, to pass history and culture from one generation to the next. Ever listened to someone talk about life and thought, I thought I was the only one who's gone through that? Every story shared is a chance to make someone feel less alone and help educate and inform those who are unaware of the challenges that are faced by people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their families, and caregivers. In many cases, storytelling is necessary to help give lawmakers an accurate picture of the reality of intellectual and developmental disabilities. It allows them to truly understand the challenges you and your family face so they can see how their decisions have a direct impact on people's lives. When you share your story with your legislators, it helps them remember that when policy decisions are being made about people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, it's affecting the lives of real people. Your story can help forge relationships with elected officials so that when decisions about healthcare policy cross their desks, they think of you, their constituent. By helping your legislators see what life looks like where you stand, you can help improve the conditions for everyone who has a disability, their families, and caregivers. Your story cannot be wrong. It is your own personal experience, and your experience has value and meaning. Questions and issues to consider when telling your story. People with disabilities and their families want access to a life in the community, no matter the level of supports necessary to make that happen. But when they try to find what they need, too often the system leaves them waiting. Why do home and community-based services matter to you? How have they impacted you or your family? How do they support you to live in the community? If you are on a waiting list for services, how long has it been? And how does that impact your daily life? What are some of the biggest issues or challenges facing your family right now? What supports do you need and depend on for health, financial stability, or inclusion in the community? What do you want your elected officials to know about how they can help address the issues or problems affecting your life? What solutions do you need? Storytelling tips. Keep it brief. Stick to the highlights. Emotions should move, not overwhelm. Passion is important, but don't give the listener an opportunity to stop listening. Motivate with hope and recovery. The following are real examples of storytelling. Ruth's story. Ruth is a senior citizen now caring for her son, who is blind, has cerebral palsy, and developmental disabilities. She believes that caregivers and families need a break free from worry, and that better long-term care options are needed to support our loved ones in their own homes as they age. Jacob's story. When Jacob's family moved to South Carolina, they thought he would receive the same level of support and services as he'd had before. But now he's on a years-long Medicaid waiver waiting list. His mom had to give up her career to stay at home to be his full-time caregiver. The financial strain of going from a two-person income household to a one-person income household has been tremendous. Christian's story. Christian is 23 years old and has autism. Because of the South Carolina Medicaid waiver programs, his mom is able to work from home and get respite services so she can take a break from caregiving every so often. Christian's very interested in learning to participate in job training and employment support programs so he can one day enter the workforce. Due to underfunding, however, these opportunities are scarce. Are you ready to share your story and let legislators know what you need? Please be sure to follow the links in this presentation to help you along your journey to become a better advocate or self-advocate.